as you know, we put in place the vessel day scheme in good faith, and of course fishermen, as you know, always come up with something new, so we're still trying to work our way to try and curb some of these issues as you raised. Others just reflagging for the sake of keeping the companies going, but the intention of the vessel day scheme was to be commercialized to the point that they will leave the fishery, but as you said, they still need some more work, and it is quite at its infant stage, so we're still developing those. So I hope, but I agree with what you have raised. Thanks.
Before I call on the next questioner, I just wanted to stress that there are solutions out there. There are solutions possible, and when we focus on which countries are the largest fishing states or the largest market states, it's not to condemn those countries for being a market, but it's to rather highlight that the answer is in your hands. And you have the potential to really make a difference for this species and for the ocean because of the market. Not that there's a problem, but that you indeed hold the solution in your hands. Any further questions? Yes, with the microphone in the back.
I'm going to stand, sorry, I'm in a t-shirt because I was really hot yesterday. My name is Dr. Tricia Campbell Watson. I'm from Hawaii. And I don't have a nation issue because I'm from Hawaii and we never can speak for the United States. I don't know who can. But we're a state that's very serious about tuna, which is why I came. And I'm Hawaiian, so I probably eat it daily. So I think I apologize for that in this room. But, okay, then I don't apologize for that. But it is one because I do a lot of marine conservation work that puts me right in the line of fire with commercial fishing and fishing regulations. And so I guess 2 points. I am interested about strategies that people have seen work, because there's violent conflict in Hawaii over this. And we have people who get death threats whenever you talk about trying to reduce takes or close areas. We're trying to expand the marine conservation area. For these reasons right now, we get threats. The second point is, I'm wondering what is being done to change the market, because to me, everything's being driven by the market. The fish that's caught in Hawaii, we have great tuna if you've never had it, but it goes straight to New York or Japan or other places. So I can't even get local tuna anymore in Hawaii. And what's happening is, I think, a ripple effect, where then we're getting it from places like Nauru or Micronesia or the Philippines. So I'm wondering what someone like me, who does have some control over our marine areas or policies and does lobbying, can do to sort of insert themselves as strategies into this. Because, I mean, you're saying there's stuff we can do, but I'm wondering what that is, because we're seeing our fish shipped right out, and we know the stuff coming in is coming from other nation states. So exactly to your point, and I sit on enough advisory councils and write enough policy that I'm willing to do whatever, but I don't know what that is. So I guess it's a question that I want. Thank you.
You want to respond? Do you want to respond?
Yeah, I might say.
Okay.
Not in direct answer, but in partial answer. One answer is a business answer. And the International Sustainable Seafood Foundation has been set up to ensure that they have a constant supply of tuna to pack. And so what they've done is they require that their member companies only purchase tuna from sustainable populations. Now, this doesn't help you directly, but by avoiding purchasing tuna from non-sustainable populations, some pressure is exerted both on the regional fish managing agencies and the fishery itself to try to fish the populations that are sustainable and avoid the ones that are not sustainable. So perhaps this overall business interest will torque the system a little bit to benefit.
If we can, just a second before you respond, Amanda wanted to add something to that.
Firstly, I would say I certainly applaud the commitment by ISSF members to do that, but I don't think they're doing that yet. I think the commitment that I've seen is that they intend to do that, and I very much hope that they will follow through on that in a timely
Well, we
manner.
can fight about that later.
Yeah, we may. Secondly, I would say there's different species that you're talking about with respect to the Hawaiian fishery and the species that are likely coming from the Western and Central Pacific, and particularly from the P&A waters. So I think that there is probably just an issue around different species and where they're fished that may come into what you're seeing. Thirdly, I would say there's one of the things that I think gets missed a lot is in the Western and Central Pacific alone, you're talking about a fishery worth $5.5 million a year. And when you start talking about money like that comes major interests and comes scary decision making. I think the single biggest thing that those involved in policy and decision making can do is to back basically the idea that we need to follow the science. Because what we're not seeing happen in most cases is effective decision making directly following the scientific recommendations. Now, Ota-san made a good point, which is that there is progress on this and that we need to not lose sight of that progress, and that's certainly true. But I think in most cases, the issue cannot be around whether it's popular or unpopular to make decisions around short-term gain. The decisions have to be based on what the science is telling us. And so if you're asking how can you get involved and what should you be pushing forward with, I would say the single biggest concept is to keep right behind the idea that decision-making should be based on the science, not on the politics.
And I'll respond to both. First, the problem with sustainable fisheries is nobody can afford when you look for the guys that are sustainable. Only Whole Foods, I don't know if people shop at Whole Foods. That's the problem. Nobody can afford it. Average local people can't, when they do identify that they're coming from sustainable fisheries, people can't afford it. It's the bottom line. Science, and I have 2 doctorates. Local people in Hawaii don't trust scientists. There's just no, and you say science, and really 14 years in college. If you put a bunch of Hawaiians in a room, we won't tell you our degrees because we're embarrassed by them because our people will yell at us. And so that's, it's kind of that thing where people just don't trust science. So I understand that as a strategy, but just know at least for us, and like I said, I don't speak for the US, most indigenous people will look at us, and throw us out of the room instantly. So I totally go for that. Like I said, I love science, but I'm always the lone person in the room who does at home. So thank you for that.
I'd like to call on someone else, but what we're talking about is when governments get together at these regional fishery management organizations, when they make decisions, it's not always the case that they're making decisions based on scientific recommendation. And what we're saying, and Ota-san is right, in ICAT, for the first time quite recently, they're making decisions based on the scientific recommendations. What we'd like to see is that happening in every fishery organization, and we'd like to see target and limit reference points, which were decided by the UN Fish Stocks Agreement in 1995, adopted for these fisheries. At the local level, whether scientists are liked or accepted or not, I recognize, regardless of what country you're in, that there are going to be challenges. There are going to be impacts on the livelihoods of fishing communities. But if we don't get it right, and if governments don't get it right in terms of sustainability, there will be nothing for those fishing communities in the near term, and that's what we want to avoid. Questions? Yeah, Barry? What?
Okay.
Sorry, oh, someone over here was first. I'm sorry. Over here, and then the man in the blue shirt after. Sorry. And then the other man in the blue shirt.
I'm from Turkey, and my question will be to the distinguished speaker from Korea about the...
We have no speaker from Korea.
Sorry. Presenter from Korea also speaks.
Japan. Japan.
Ah, okay, sorry for it. Sorry.
They're neighbors.
Sorry for it, okay. My question will be about the 2 figures, the second one and the third one. I realize that there is a great fluctuation. And do you know, can you define the reason of it? Is it a natural cause or is it a man-made? Because the figure is about the catch, fish catch of 40 or 50 years, but there's a great fluctuation.
Thank you.
Well,
use the microphone.
So you mean the figure that shows the age composition of catch? Fluctuation?
Yeah.
That's because that figure indicates number of individual, and therefore, and tuna lay a lot of egg, but the survival rate of egg varies year by year. So, year with good recruitment, we have a lot of catch of juveniles, so numbers get higher. And there is a strong year class about every 4 or 5 years, and this strong class will keep the number upwards. So that's fluctuation.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, Barry Weaver from Eco in New Zealand, and thanks for organising the forum. I'm sorry I missed a few speakers. I had a contact group and I couldn't make it. But one of the points I was going to raise was the issue about observer coverage and why it's so hard to get 100% observer coverage. And I reflect on these vessels which operate within New Zealand waters. There's a really good relationship with some Japanese vessels that fish in New Zealand waters. We've got 100% observer coverage on those vessels. But when they go outside of New Zealand waters, it's hard to get coverage at all. And they're the same vessels, and there's no reason why they can't have coverage. Those similar type vessels with slightly different gear fish for toothfish in Antarctic waters. They have 200% observer coverage. Each vessel has 2 observers on. We can't see why those vessels in tuna fisheries can't also have very high observer coverage. It just doesn't make sense in terms of what's practical, because clearly it is possible and it is practical. Thanks.
So the simple answer, I guess, which is I'm starting to say that may not actually be so simple, but the situation is that once you get out of the EEZ and start looking at high seas, if you're looking at high seas tuna fisheries, you're generally then working within the remit of the Tuna Regional Fisheries Management Organization that's covering that area. And for a decision to be made there to get that level of observer coverage requires consensus. And one of the dynamics you see a lot in the Western and Central Pacific is that when you start to get to the high seas issues, it's very, very difficult to get consensus on even something that seems relatively easy to solve, like observer coverage. So in some cases where you have, in a situation that Charlie described, the parties to the narrow agreement, in their waters you see 100% observer coverage. But it depends on the RFMO as to what they will agree. The large tuna RFMOs have been working particularly in the area of Persane towards 100% observer coverage. But it really depends on the intergovernmental body you're looking at and the political will of the governments making the decision at the time.
Yeah, go ahead, Bruce.
There's one more factor. It costs a lot of money, and it's a dangerous business being an observer.
Well, if you can do it in Antarctic waters, I can't see why you can't do it anywhere else.
I think, Barry, that you raise an important point, and I know there are also some efforts underway, and I think they're quite encouraging to look at electronic observers, to look at instituting a system of digitization. I don't understand the electronics, I just know there are people who know how to do that sort of thing. That rather than have people observing, that to have something that is tight in terms of enforcement, etc., but to have digital observations on all vessels. And I'm optimistic that if people put their minds to it, we could come up with that.
So,
yeah.
Yes, ISSF has funded 3 vessels with electronic equipment and observers, and have compared the results from the cameras on board with the results from the observers. And for overall catch and the larger species, they get pretty identical data. For bycatch, identification of sharks and things, the observer produces better data than the electronic system. But it looks like it may be possible to put electronic systems on board. And they start working as soon as the engines that set the net go, and they keep going until they stop. And one of the advantages, this gives you when a Persane is set and when it's hauled back, and you've got a picture of the geography that's covered, and as a pretty good idea of most of the larger species. If there's little species mixed in there, the image isn't very good and it doesn't work so well on that. But 3 attempts at doing this have been reasonably successful. So as Sue said, there is hope of developing an electronic system that would avoid the cost measures and avoid the coercion measures that exist on some vessels.
Thank you. Please.
Thank you. I've got a couple of points and questions. First,
Identify yourself.
sorry, Kelvin Pasfield. Could be a number of hats, but I'll say Pukatea Society, an environmental NGO in the Cook Islands. First on the ISSF's they're sourcing their fish from sustainable sources. I think there's 2 things there. There could be a sustainable source of skipjack, for example, but while that's being caught, it's also the bycatch of an unsustainable juvenile big eye, which I'll just get through them in one go to save me carrying on. On the longline observer coverage of 5%, my point was already covered. There is the possibility for video surveillance, and I think again Bruce said one disadvantage you couldn't get the species identification down fine-tuned in that, but at least you could see, are they finning sharks and throwing them over the side, for example? Do they catch how many turtles? At least you know it's a turtle. So I think there is some real pluses in that, and adding that to the 5% observer coverage and using one to check the other, I think you can really get some much better information. And then just for Charleston, the FAD closure is 4 months at the moment for the PNA tuna fishery. The 100% observer coverage, is that just for the 4 months, or is it for the whole year when it's when there's not a FAD closure as well? And also, I think we just need to be clear, because it wasn't quite clear, that the 100% observer coverage in any case is only per seine boats. All the longline boats in the PNA countries still are just aiming at 5%.
Thank you for those questions. Yes, the 4-month closure is for this year. The observer coverage is for per seine vessels throughout the year, the whole time, not just the 4-month closure.
Other questions? Yeah. First, is there anyone who hasn't asked a question? But it would be good to have more discussion on Korea's role in the bluefin fishery.
Thank you for giving me the mic again. I would like to comment something important for the coastal states in tuna fishing ground and also Korea and Japan, fishing nations. You know, based on the research that I made this spring, Korean government, they set an Ocean Industry Development Act in 2008. This act is to promote the ocean industry. So the Korean government now is systemically promote and support ocean industry. And so in this relation, Korean government, they are conducting many economic assistance to the coastal states. So I think that to set a sustainable fisheries management system, the coastal states decision makers should be very clever and smart. Because Korean government, the Japanese government, Taiwan government, they are competing by giving kind of pies, some small assistance, economic assistance, but they are not interested in the sustainable management of tuna. Because if the tuna is run out of, they are quitting. That's all. So I think the coastal state, they should be, the decision makers, the coastal states, they should know this fact really. And so based on this point, we can have a better system?
To some degree, I agree with you, and it's an interesting opportunity to bring everything back around to what was the aim of introducing some of these discussions and presentations in this workshop. And I guess it comes back to a couple of key points. First is that I don't think that any of the speakers that have spoken or any of the questions that have been asked would disagree with the idea that this is it's a highly complex issue to manage. You know, when you start looking at the number of coastal states and distant water nations involved, the interplay between the way the species are caught, the different gears, the challenges of making decisions as a coastal state with fishing communities who would be impacted, the challenges for industry in terms of sourcing and ensuring supply, etc. But at this point in time, the science is available by and large to enable the development of precautionary catch limits and to put in place target limit reference points. And that is something that we would encourage governments and others working with governments to continue to promote. Secondly, the technology is in place to allow us to actually address the challenges like observer coverage, where we do, and I would just refer to the